Find me the Pokemon fan who doesn't want to go to Japan, and I'd be beyond surprised. I'd be flabbergasted, because yeah, most of you do. I was one of these people. I want to go and see the home of Pokemon. And this year, I finally did it. I went out in the summer for the Pokemon World Championships, but I also, as you've probably seen in some videos, got to explore the areas that inspired the world of Pokemon. I knew that I didn't want to miss a thing, and I wanted to have the ultimate Pokemon fan experience, the ultimate Pokemon fan trip around Japan, so that I could make this video, this guide for you. And so I reached out to Discovery Travel, who do custom tours around Japan. They've sponsored this video, and I said to them, Discovery, I want to have the ultimate Pokemon fan experience around Japan, and they obliged. They pointed out things that I wouldn't have even considered checking out. And I know you might think, hang on, isn't Japan really expensive? Discovery have some trips where you can get like $500 to $1,000 off of your trip. The link is at the top of the description, and it's probably the best time now to start booking for the spring, and I hear spring is the most beautiful time to go. If I was going to go back again, which I'm sure I will one day, it'll be in the spring. So I guess this is my first sort of unofficial point. Go in the spring when it's beautiful, and go while you can get a huge discount like right now with Discovery Travel. And then here is my ultimate guide for you if you're a Pokemon fan wanting to visit Japan. Here are 12 things you absolutely have to see. Number 1, Pokemon centers, stores, vending machines, and that includes in the airports. So, okay, hang on, that's 4 things in one, right? You've all probably heard of the Pokemon Center. Oh yes, the Pokemon Center in Japan. You're just gonna walk in, they're gonna heal up your Pokemon. But no, it's a shop, obviously, for all things Pokemon. Usually going in any of them, there's a whole range of Pokemon sitting cutie plushes, or I think they're called Pokemon Fits in Japan, and a whole number of other Pokemon products, and sometimes even exclusive products between the different stores, because yes, there are multiple stores. There's a whole list on Cerebi.net, but just if you're visiting Tokyo, you can check out Pokemon Center Yokohama, which is where Pokemon Worlds was held, Pokemon Center Tokyo Bay, which I didn't quite get the chance to go to, but it is, yeah, Tokyo Bay, Pokemon Center Mega Tokyo in Sunshine City, which is super, super cool. There's a whole bunch of stuff around that, including like a Pokemon Go area, and a whole bunch of Pokemon statues, including like a really cool stone Rowlet statue, Pokemon Center Skytree Town, Pokemon Center DX, which I personally think is the best, although I also really like the Pokemon Center in Shibuya with the Mewtwo. The Mewtwo statue is super cool. And if that's not enough for you, there's also much smaller Pokemon stores that tend to stock the same kind of stuff, but are fun to check out. There's one underneath Tokyo Central Station. There's also one in Narita Airport, which I didn't know about, but in Terminal 2, there's a whole little mini Pokemon Center in there with a Xerneas and Yveltal statue. I literally saw that on the very last day. Would have missed it otherwise. And then on top of that, there's vending machines, and in some of the airports, the vending machines have exclusive Pikachu plushies. I wasn't able to get hold of any, sadly, because sometimes they're out of stock, but if you are ever going to a Japanese airport, double check, do they have a Pokemon vending machine? Number 2, the 84 Hashi Cafe. This is an absolute must. It's kind of advertised on social media as a secret cafe because the location is secret. You don't get the address of the place and just go. No, you have to book online. You have to book ahead of time. I'll leave a link to all of these, by the way, in the description as well. And when you book, you'll be greeted by a member of staff a little ways away from the location, and they take you to this top secret location. And what is the 84 Hashi Cafe? Well, it's a cafe run by an ex-Nintendo employee whose cafe is filled with all sorts of incredibly rare memorabilia. He worked on coding on the original Pokemon Red and Blue, and it is so interesting in there. There are amazing photos and collectibles, things that have been signed, things that are just truly one of a kind. I don't want to post too many images because it's really the kind of thing that you should go and see for yourself. Everything in there was all incredibly reasonably priced, and actually while there I got lucky that someone who I knew recognized me, who is actually themselves a Nintendo employee, so we got to hang out and have a whole little chat. But the guy who runs it is one of the most lovely guys. When asked what gave you the idea to step away from game development and move into running your own bar, he just replied, it came from God. And that's just his thing. I thought it was absolutely incredible, and he is an absolute must if you're a Pokemon fan in Japan. Number 3, the Fossil Museum. So this is one that I very sadly didn't get to do, but it was on while I was out there. It's just a little further out of Tokyo, and it doesn't take too long to get out there, just a couple hours. You can actually watch the vlog on Umbreon Libris' channel, who got to go. And when I met Umbreon Libris finally, which was lovely, by the way, when I met him out there at Worlds, he was wearing a shirt from the Fossil Museum, and I wish I went. Not only because it's just really cool, it's an exhibition in a real fossil museum showing off all these incredible Pokemon models, what inspired them. I mean, if you're into the Pokemon Tree of Evolution, you would want to go, but also because it's at the Gunma Museum of Natural History, which is literally the area that inspired Pewter City. It's the Fossil Museum from Pokemon in real life. I'm genuinely gutted that we didn't get to go, and if I was going back, I would absolutely make sure I was going. Just make sure you check the website, because the exhibition is sometimes hosted at other museums, but I would have loved to have gone while it was at the actual Pewter City Museum. Speaking of which, number 4, obviously go and check out other real-life Pokemon locations. Obviously, if you're in central Tokyo, you're going to be seeing the areas that inspired Celadon City and Saffron City. If you go a little ways out into the rural areas, you might get to Pallet Town, or yeah, get out to Pewter City. But for me, it was all about hopping on the train, and again, I gotta say a huge thank you to Discovery Travel here for providing the JR Pass, because the JR Pass in just a couple hours gets you from one end of the country to the other, and you can go all the way to Kyoto, or in other words, to the Johto region. And Kyoto is the area that inspired Ecruteak, and you can so clearly see it in the architecture. We went to the Kinkakuji Temple, which is the golden tower that somewhat inspired the towers of Ecruteak City, and that is a kind of thing that you would only be able to do with the JR Pass. Sorting out the JR Pass can be a little bit tricky if you don't know what you're doing, so again, that's where Discovery Travel really helps you out, and certainly helped us out. And of course, we booked our train ahead of time because we wanted to make sure that we booked the seats so that we had enough room to take all our luggage across, so we could spend some extended time in the Johto region. We also took a short domestic flight down to Fukuoka, which is the area that inspired Rustbro, so we also got to check out some of the Hoenn region, and seeing these areas, you really got a feel of like, yeah, like I'm in the Pokemon world. I can see why the creators, how they would have created each town to look like this, and why they chose what they chose. Literally landing in Fukuoka, seeing the crystal blue of the water and the little islands around it, it very clearly was Hoenn, and that was super cool for me. Number 5, we're only on number 5, Pokelids. Pokelids are everywhere. I actually didn't get to see any of them, but they are absolutely everywhere. It's kind of a nice little tourist thing. In fact, some of the areas are specifically designed to have Pokelids to attract tourists to areas that they otherwise might not think to go and see. So it really encourages you to get out there. I recommend the page on Cerebi.net, which tells you where every single Pokelid is. So yeah, go Pokelid hunting. Number 6, we've talked about Pokemon stores, but what about non-official Pokemon stores? What about just Pokemon card and game shopping? Where do you go for that? Akihabara. That's the district that you want to go to. Pokemon card shops and video game shops and retro game stores, they do exist elsewhere, but Akihabara is filled with like Pokemon card collectibles. You really see that in Japan there's an emphasis on like high quality cards. Like they love their PSA 10s, and like that's the standard. Like everything has to be PSA 10. Anything below actually becomes quite cheap. So it's super easy to get hold of some cards that you might have otherwise not been able to get here. I got this very cool Giovanni card literally because the surface is slightly damaged. It doesn't look it looks brand new, but it was cheap and it's very cool. One of my favorites. You can also pick up all sorts of retro games there. Like I found boxed copies of Japanese Ruby and Sapphire that I'm sort of regretting not picking up, and there are certain consoles that work the same way internationally. So for example, the GameCube, I managed to get some like GameCube to Game Boy Advance adapters relatively cheap because they work the same there as they do here. So Akihabara, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. You want to head out there and spend a day just shopping in that area. There are so many stores to check out. Number 7, how have I not even talked about this yet? The Pokemon Cafe. So there's a number of Pokemon cafes across Japan, but I recommend the one that's next to the Pokemon Center ZX because you'll probably be going there anyway. And the Pokemon Cafe next to the Pokemon Center, it was incredible. The service was incredible. The food was great. We got to keep, oh, I gotta show you this. You could buy a dessert in this Gengar glass and you'd get to keep the Gengar glass, and yeah, this is just super cool. And the dessert was amazing. The desserts in the cafe were wow. Genuinely, the food was of an exceptional quality and at a brilliant price, and if you just happen to book at a particularly good time, Pikachu will come out and do a dance. So if you're into that, the Pikachu will be dancing. Number 8, limited time events. So I went out for the Pokemon World Championships, but there's always something going on in Japan. So be on the lookout for collaborations. There was a collaboration called Pokemon Wonder where you could like go to an area of Japan and it would be like a park and there would be specific like Pokemon that you could see in the real world. Or there's the Pikachu outbreak that happens, I think, every single year. So check when you're booking. But yeah, there's almost always some kind of Pokemon collaboration going on. Over Worlds, there was events going on in Japan that actually weren't at the venue for Pokemon Worlds, but there was like one of the Pokemon card artists was just doing like a showing of her cards, I guess, which is super cool. So look out for stuff like that. I guess the best way to find that is, again, make sure you're kind of following Cerebi.net and seeing what's on there. Number 9, the Pokemon Hotel. Okay, so the Pokemon hotels are incredible. I'm going to side note here because this is just one other thing that you can only do while you're in Japan. I had my own cool hotel experience with Phoebe and Discovery Travel. They very kindly put us up in these little pod hotels where you have like your own little unit, and it was just very, very sweet and very peaceful. They had manga to read. It was really, really fun. And that is a cool experience if you want kind of a sensory deprivation. You just want some peace and quiet and just your own space, I guess is the best way to describe it. But if you'd like to fill your space with Pokemon goodness, that's where the Pokemon hotels come in, and they are filled with Pokemon goodness. If you really want to complete the Pokemon package, you gotta spend a night in one of these. There are up to 8 different venues to choose from, so there's plenty of locations around Tokyo, and actually even outside of Tokyo, that you can enjoy, including one in Osaka. And I know you might think Osaka's far away. Well, number 1, you got the JR pass, and number 2, you're gonna want to be going to Osaka because number 10 in Osaka, the Universal Pokemon Parade. If you go to Universal, the Universal theme park, Universal Japan, there is a Pokemon Parade that happens there, and you probably should go to Universal Japan. There's also Nintendo World is attached to that. Just make sure you get your tickets for Nintendo World early. You do not want to be showing up without those tickets, otherwise you are queuing at the early hours of the morning. But yeah, and again, and you might be thinking, but hang on, Tokyo is like the other end of Japan to Osaka. I'm probably not going out to Osaka. It's so easy with the JR Pass, which Discovery Travel provides in all of their bookings. And so those are my 10 Pokemon things, but I got 2 more things for you. So number 11, other anime and video game stuff. Japan isn't just about Pokemon. There are so many other little different areas you can go. We went to a Chainsaw Man cafe, which was honestly super cool. It was like inside another hotel, and the food quality was exceptional. Actually, it was in most places I went in Japan. I really had a good time with food there. Recommend the fruit sandwiches, by the way. Not a thing we have in the UK. Not a thing I would make in the UK. Different bread, I think. But fruit sandwiches. Mwah! But whether you're a fan of Chainsaw Man, you want to go to the cafe, or see the giant Gundam, or go for the Yu-Gi-Oh! World Championships, there's always something else for you, for your, I assume, other interests that align with Pokemon out there. We did actually also fly, when we flew to Fukuoka, we got a kind of a bus out to Hita. It really reminded me of like the bus to Kitakame, and we're in the sort of middle of nowhere, rural Japan, in this town called Hita, where there are statues to the Attack on Titan kids, because the creator of Attack on Titan is there, and there's a whole museum which was sadly closed the one day we went with no warning anywhere, so we couldn't have known any different, but we did get to see the statues at least and get some pretty cool photos. And then finally, number 12, see other stuff in Japan. See Japan, you know, I mean, and that's the key thing. Japan, while maybe a little bit hot in the summer, maybe you want to go in the spring, maybe in the autumn, but in the summer, a little bit too hot. But even that didn't take away from the sheer beauty of this country. The architecture in particular is fascinating. All of the different shrines and temples that you get to see around are incredible. Go off the beaten path. I actually really recommend that you try and spend an evening out at Mount Fuji. We went to a place called the Mizuno Hotel, not getting paid to promote them specifically or anything like that, but it was a wonderful stay. And seeing Mount Fuji across the lake with Phoebe was absolutely incredible. There is more than just Universal and Disney parks, of course, and Pokemon stuff. Japan as a country as a whole is just gorgeous. So go off the beaten path a little bit. And if you need any help with it, I recommend reach out to the people at Discovery Travel. Book your kind of customized trip today. And Discovery right now on their website have some incredible packages going on, ranging from discounts of $500 to $1,000, which is absolutely wild. So there's no better time to kind of set up a trip for now. Maybe even set up a trip for the spring. I hear spring is absolutely beautiful in Japan, so get on that now. I'm pretty sure literally every Pokemon fan I've ever spoken to has said, yes, I'd love to go to Japan at some point. So if that sounds like you, maybe some point is pretty soon. Get booking and let this video be your guide. So hi, Pokemon Masters.
Hello there, it's me, Professor Oak. This video is over, so please choose another one wisely and quickly. Bye-bye.
Just the biggest thank you to those of you who've been supporting this channel on Patreon, including the big patrons of this month, Jedruben, Charmander Aznable, Anthony Lee, and the Alligator. Thank you so much.